The war between the Korvath Alliance and the Zennir Star-Host had run for 211 years before either side's own historians could agree on precisely how it started, which was, by the war's final decades, considerably less relevant than the simple fact of its continuing. It had consumed 6 border systems, exhausted 3 generations of shipbuilding capacity on both sides, and settled, in recent years, into a grinding stalemate along a contested frontier neither side could quite afford to abandon and neither side could quite afford to finish winning. Captain Ilun Vask had spent the better part of that stalemate flying courier and scout runs for the Korvath Alliance, work considerably less glamorous than fleet command but, until the engagement at the Holloway Drift 3 days earlier, work that had at least been predictable. The Holloway Drift engagement had not been predictable. A Zennir strike wing under Commander Yara Thess had caught Vask's small scout element attempting to relay critical intelligence back through contested space, and what followed had been 11 hours of pursuit across increasingly damaged fold space, Vask's own vessel taking a glancing but critical hit to its drive regulation systems in the engagement's final exchange. Drive containments failing, his own engineer reported, 3 hours into the escape, voice tight with an urgency that made clear the situation had moved past merely dangerous. If we attempt another jump on this regulator, we have no meaningful control over where we actually end up. We don't have a choice, Vask said, watching Thess's own pursuing vessel close the remaining distance on his sensor display. A jump with no control is still better odds than staying here. The jump that followed carried Vask's damaged vessel considerably further, and in a considerably more random direction, than any deliberate fold transit his own navigation logs had ever recorded. When his ship's systems finally stabilized enough to register a location at all, it registered a system entirely unfamiliar to any chart in the Korvath Alliance's own considerable stellar registry, a modest yellow star, a scattering of planets, and one world, the third from its star, carrying an atmospheric and orbital signature that Vask's own sensor officer took several long minutes to fully process. Inhabited, she finally reported. Populated, technologically active world. Captain, this system isn't on any chart we carry. We may be the first Korvath vessel to ever see it. Vask had no time to consider the discovery's broader significance, because Commander Thess's own pursuing vessel, having survived the same uncontrolled jump through a considerably more capable drive regulator that had held together where Vask's own had not, emerged into the same unfamiliar system barely 4 minutes behind him, considerably less damaged, and with every intention of finishing an engagement that a 2-century war had never once required either side to consider ending anywhere. Near an unknown, populated world neither of them had ever meant to find. Lieutenant Sana Whitlock had spent 4 years stationed aboard Halcyon Station, a modest deep space monitoring outpost positioned at the edge of the Sol system's outer defense perimeter, doing work that had, across most of those 4 years, consisted primarily of cataloging debris fields and confirming, week after uneventful week, that nothing of any consequence had entered the system's outer sensor range. The 2 contacts that appeared within the same 90-second window, both showing catastrophic drive transit stress signatures and neither one matching any registry Earth's own limited external contact database maintained, ended that 4-year run of uneventful monitoring in a single alert cascade that had Whitlock reaching for a priority channel she had trained for but never once actually needed to use. 2 unregistered vessels, both showing signs of a hard, uncontrolled fold transit arrival, she reported to Admiral Rafael Quintero, Earth's senior defense coordinator, within minutes of the contact's appearance. They don't appear to be arriving together. Configuration and hull markings are entirely distinct from each other. This looks less like a coordinated approach and more like Admiral, I think we may have just had 2 different unrelated ships crash into our system by accident, in the middle of shooting at each other. Quintero's own assessment, delivered to President Helena Aldercroft within the hour, carried a caution shaped by Earth's own quiet history of managing contact with capabilities it did not fully control. We don't know who either of these vessels belongs to, or what brought them here, he told her. What we do know is that whatever conflict damaged them badly enough to arrive the way they did clearly didn't originate anywhere near us, and I don't believe either of them planned to be here at all. Earth's own defensive posture, built quietly across the decades since a considerably earlier and more deliberate first contact incident had first taught Earth's leadership the value of maintaining genuine capability without advertising it unnecessarily, positioned a modest response element to intercept both vessels with an instruction that reflected Aldercroft's own careful instinct for the situation. We don't know their history with each other, she told Quintero. We don't know if intervening helps us or drags us into something we have no part in. But 2 damaged ships that clearly didn't choose to be here, still shooting at each other in our own system, isn't something we can simply monitor from a distance and hope resolves itself. Move to intercept both. Contain the engagement before it does more damage to our own system than it's already done to them. Vask's own transmission, sent the moment Earth's intercepting vessels made contact, carried a request his own Alliance protocols had never anticipated needing to make of a species nobody in Korvath command structure had ever previously identified as existing. "This vessel is critically damaged and requesting emergency assistance," he transmitted, on every frequency his own damaged systems could still broadcast across. "We arrived in your system by accident, fleeing hostile pursuit. We are not here by any deliberate intention and we have no wish to bring our conflict into contact with your territory. We would request repair assistance and safe passage, if your people are able to offer either." Commander Thess's own transmission, arriving considerably closer behind Vask's than Earth's intercepting forces found entirely comfortable, carried a demand rather than a request. "The vessel you are currently in contact with is a Korvath Alliance combatant, fleeing lawful pursuit in an active military engagement," she transmitted. "We request that you surrender custody of that vessel and its crew to Zennir Star-Host forces. We have no quarrel with your world. We do not consider your involvement in this matter to extend beyond that single, limited request." Admiral Quintero, monitoring both transmissions from Earth's own coordination center, found himself facing a decision his own careful, decades-long philosophy of quiet capability had never quite anticipated needing to make this quickly, or with this little context about either party's actual history or intentions. "We don't know enough about either of them to know what surrendering Vask's crew, or refusing to, actually means for us going forward," he told Aldercroft, in the brief window available before either alien commander's patience for a delayed response was likely to run out. "What I do know is that we didn't choose either side of whatever brought them here, and I'm not comfortable handing a crew who arrived here damaged and asking for help over to the party that was actively pursuing them, regardless of whatever history exists between them that we don't yet understand." Aldercroft's decision, delivered within minutes, reflected a principle Earth's own diplomatic history had built carefully across every prior contact it had managed since first discovering it was not alone in the galaxy. "We will not surrender anyone who has requested our assistance to a party actively pursuing them, without considerably more context than we currently have," she said. "Inform Commander Thess that we intend to offer Captain Vask's crew emergency repair assistance under our own protection, and that we would welcome a diplomatic conversation about the broader situation, but that we will not simply hand over a vessel that arrived here seeking help." Thess's response, delivered with a formal correctness that did not fully disguise the frustration underneath it, carried the first genuine indication of exactly how badly this accidental encounter was about to complicate a two-century war neither Earth nor, in truth, either commander present had any real intention of expanding. "Your decision will be reported to Zennir Star-Host Command," she said. "I would ask you to understand that this matter did not begin as a conflict involving your world, and that your decision to shelter an enemy combatant may change that." Vask's own automated distress beacon, transmitting continuously since the moment of his damaged arrival, reached Korvath Alliance relay networks within 2 days, carrying enough fragmentary data about an inhabited, previously unknown system to prompt a response considerably more significant than a simple recovery mission for one damaged scout vessel. High Marshal Devrin Ashen, reviewing the beacon's fragmentary reports at Korvath Alliance Central Command, recognized in the discovery an opportunity that had nothing to do with Vask's own survival and everything to do with a two-century warzone grinding strategic calculus. An unknown, previously unregistered inhabited system, discovered by accident in territory neither side has ever mapped, he told his own war council. "If this world's resources or position offer any strategic value, and if the Zennir Star-Host is already aware of its existence through their own pursuing vessel, I am not willing to let them establish sole contact and potential alliance with an unknown power before we've had the opportunity to do the same." Thess's own report to Zennir Star-Host Command produced an almost identical calculation from the opposite direction. Fleet Marshal Corin Velen, reviewing Thess's account of Earth's decision to shelter Vask's crew, drew a conclusion considerably more alarming than the diplomatic nuance of that single decision actually warranted. "An unknown world has chosen to shelter a Korvath combatant over honoring our recovery request," Velen told his own command staff. "If this world is already inclined toward the Alliance, or can be persuaded to ally with them given the resources this war has cost us both, we cannot allow that alliance to solidify uncontested. Dispatch a fleet sufficient to secure our own interests in this system before the Alliance establishes theirs." Neither commander, in authorizing their respective deployments, framed the decision as an attack on Earth itself. Both framed it, with genuine internal conviction, as a necessary defensive or strategic response to the other side's presumed advantage, a calculation that, within days, produced two separate battle fleets converging on a system neither empire had known existed a week earlier, for reasons that had almost nothing to do with Earth's own actual intentions and everything to do with a war Earth had never chosen to be part of. Whitlock, monitoring the developing situation from Halcyon Station, watched both fleets' approach vectors resolve with a growing unease that Quintero shared without reservation. "They're not coming here to negotiate," she reported. "Both of them are treating our system as contested territory in their own war, because of one accidental crash and one decision we made to help the crew who asked for it." "Then we didn't cause this war to arrive here," Quintero said. "But we're the ones who have to make sure it doesn't get to decide what happens to our own system once it does." The Korvath Alliance Advance Element, 31 vessels, dispatched under High Marshal Ashan's authorization to secure Vask's recovery and establish a preliminary diplomatic presence before any Zennir counterpart could do the same, arrived in the Sol system 11 days after Vask's initial crash, encountering not the uncontested opportunity Ashan's planning had anticipated, but a Zennir advance element of comparable size that had arrived barely 6 hours earlier, already establishing its own position near Earth's outer defense perimeter. Neither fleet commander, meeting unexpectedly in his system neither side had intended to treat as an active theater, had received explicit authorization to engage the other directly. Both, however, understood their own respective mandates as requiring them to prevent the opposing fleet from establishing an uncontested advantage, a mandate that proved, within hours of the two forces' mutual detection, considerably more difficult to execute without direct confrontation than either home command structure had fully anticipated. "We are not authorized to withdraw and cede this position," the Korvath Advance Commander told his own staff, monitoring the Zennir formation's parallel presence. "Nor are we explicitly authorized to engage them directly in a system belonging to a third, uninvolved power." I don't believe High Marshal Ashan's original orders adequately anticipated this exact situation. The skirmish that followed, when it finally began, arose less from any explicit order from either home command structure than from the accumulated pressure of two hostile fleets holding position within direct engagement range of each other for nearly 2 full days, a tension that a single misidentified sensor contact, a Korvath supply vessel's routine approach, briefly registering on Zennir sensors as a potential flanking maneuver, finally broke. The exchange that followed cost both fleets real losses within its opening hour, losses that spread, within the engagement's second day, considerably beyond the two advance elements' own immediate positions and into Earth's own outer orbital space, where debris and stray weapons fire from an engagement neither side had explicitly authorized began threatening Earth's own civilian orbital infrastructure directly. Admiral Quintero, watching Earth's own defensive perimeter absorb collateral damage from a battle fought entirely between two powers Earth had no part in provoking, made the decision Aldercroft's own earlier restraint had always understood might eventually become necessary. "We can no longer simply monitor this from a defensive posture," he told his own command staff. "Whatever this war actually is between them, it's now directly threatening our own people and our own infrastructure. We intervene, not to take a side in their war, but to make clear that neither side gets to keep fighting it inside our own system without consequence." Both home command structures, receiving reports of their respective advance elements' engagement and its spillover into Earth's own civilian infrastructure, made the same escalating calculation within hours of each other, rather than withdraw from a confrontation that had already cost real losses. Both High Marshal Ashan and Fleet Marshal Velen authorized their full main battle fleets, 241 Korvath vessels, and 219 Zennir vessels, to converge on the Sol system, each one now committed to an engagement considerably larger than either side had ever intended a chance discovery to produce. "We are two accidental arrivals and one contained skirmish away from an engagement between 460 warships, inside a system belonging to a species that never asked for any part of this war," Whitlock reported to Quintero, watching both main fleets approach vectors resolve. "Neither of them planned this. I don't think either of them can stop it now without one side believing the other gained a decisive advantage by being the first to withdraw." Quintero's response reflected a judgment that Aldercroft's own government authorized within the hour, understanding fully the weight of what Earth's own quiet, carefully maintained capability was now being asked to demonstrate for the first time at genuine, existential scale. "Then we don't let it be a decision either of them has to make alone," he said. "Full defense grid activation. We are not choosing a side in a 2-century war that predates our own contact with either of them by longer than either has any right to expect us to respect. We are choosing to make clear that this war does not get to continue inside our home system, regardless of which side believes it holds the advantage in stopping first." What Earth's full defense grid activation revealed, to both arriving main fleets simultaneously, was a coordinated planetary and orbital defense capability considerably beyond anything either the Korvath Alliance's or Zennir Star-Host's own intelligence had ever had reason to assess, precisely because neither power had ever previously had cause to look for it, a network built quietly, across decades, specifically for the scenario Earth's leadership had always understood might eventually arrive. In some form, even if the accidental, chaotic manner of this particular arrival had never been the version anyone had explicitly planned for. The demonstration that followed was neither an attack on either fleet nor a passive absorption of their continuing engagement, but something considerably more difficult for either side's own doctrine to process: a coordinated interposition, Earth's own defense grid establishing a neutral buffer zone directly between the two main fleet's approach vectors, disabling, with precise and clearly non-lethal restraint, any vessel from either side that attempted to cross that buffer to continue direct engagement with the other. "They're not choosing a side," Velen's own tactical officer reported, watching 3 Zennir vessels attempting to press the engagement lose propulsion in the same coordinated pattern that had, moments earlier, disabled 2 Korvath vessels attempting the same. "They're stopping both of us, equally, from continuing this anywhere near their world." Ashen, receiving the same report from his own tactical staff, understood. Within the same hour Velen reached an identical conclusion from the opposite side of the buffer, that neither empire's own war, however deeply entrenched across 2 centuries of grinding stalemate, retained any meaningful path toward a decisive outcome inside a system now actively and effectively refusing to let it continue. The ceasefire that followed Earth's interposition was not, in its opening hours, a peace either High Marshal Ashen or Fleet Marshal Velen genuinely wanted, but a practical recognition that neither fleet could continue its engagement without directly confronting a third power whose actual capability neither side's own intelligence had ever previously assessed, and whose demonstrated restraint, disabling rather than destroying, and doing so with strict, visible impartiality toward both. Combatants offered neither side a credible narrative under which continued escalation still served their own interests. President Aldercroft's formal message to both home governments, transmitted within a day of the interposition's success, framed Earth's position with a directness that left neither side room for the kind of ambiguous interpretation that might have permitted further escalation. "This war did not begin here and Earth claims no stake in whatever grievance originally produced it," she said. "We will not permit it to continue inside our system, regardless of which side believes doing so serves its own strategic interests. We would welcome the opportunity to help facilitate a resolution between your 2 powers, if either of you is interested in one. We will not permit our home to remain a battlefield for a conflict that was never ours, while that offer remains unanswered." High Marshal Ashen and Fleet Marshal Velen, each independently reporting to their own respective governments a military and political reality neither had anticipated needing to explain, that a 2-century war zone accidental extension into unknown territory had been arrested, decisively and without meaningful loss to the arresting power, by a species neither empire had known existed 3 weeks earlier, found themselves facing pressure from their own war-exhausted governments to treat the interposition not as a humiliation to be avenged, but as an opportunity neither side had found the internal political will to pursue on its own. The negotiations that followed, conducted over the following months with Earth serving, at both empires' own eventual request, as a neutral facilitating party, did not resolve the underlying 2-century dispute between the Korvath Alliance and Zennir Star-Host entirely, a conflict with roots considerably older and more complex than any single accidental discovery could fully unwind, but it produced, for the first time in over 2 centuries, a formal, mutually observed ceasefire along the contested frontier that had originally produced Vask's own desperate flight, a ceasefire that held, in the months that followed, considerably longer than either empire's own war-weary populations had genuinely expected it to. Captain Ilun Vask, whose damaged and uncontrolled full transit had begun the entire chain of events 3 months earlier, remained on Earth throughout the negotiations that followed, his own vessel fully repaired within the first month but his own presence increasingly valued, by both his own alliance superiors and Earth's own diplomatic staff, as a living reminder of exactly how the entire crisis had actually begun. "I never meant to find your world," he told Lieutenant Whitlock, in a quiet moment during the negotiations' final week, the 2 of them having developed an easy, informal friendship across the months since her own station had first detected his damaged arrival. "A damaged drive regulator and a bad jump. That's the entire reason any of this happened. 2 empires nearly dragged a 2-century war into your home system because my ship couldn't hold a stable course." "You didn't drag anything here on purpose," Whitlock said. "You asked for help, and the 2 people chasing you turned that into something considerably bigger than either of us actually chose. I don't think the accident is what mattered, in the end. I think what mattered was what all of us decided to do once it happened." President Aldercroft, reviewing the final ceasefire terms alongside Admiral Quintero in the weeks following the negotiations' conclusion, offered an assessment considerably more measured than the scale of what Earth's involvement had ultimately achieved might have suggested was warranted. "We didn't set out to end a 2-century war," she said. "We set out to keep our own home from becoming a battlefield for a conflict that had nothing to do with us. Whatever came after that was never really our accomplishment to claim. It was theirs, once we made clear the fighting couldn't happen here anymore." Quintero considered that assessment for a long moment before responding. "Maybe," he said. "But I don't think either empire walks away from this believing accidents like this stay contained to just the 2 of them anymore. I think that changes something about how carefully both of them handle the next unexpected thing that crosses their path, whether it's another accident or something considerably more deliberate. In Earth's own diplomatic archive, a records officer closed the file on what internal council documentation had, across the crisis's 3-month duration, simply come to call the Holloway incident, appending a final note that carried, in its closing lines, considerably more uncertainty than triumph. This crisis began with a damaged drive regulator and ended with a ceasefire neither warring power had found the political will to pursue on its own for over 2 centuries. Earth did not choose to be found. Earth did not choose to intervene in a war that predated its own contact with either involved power. What Earth chose was simply this, that an accident happening to arrive at our doorstep did not obligate us to let it decide what happened next, in our own home, without our own voice in the outcome. No one ever revised it. Somewhere in Korvath Alliance space, and somewhere in the Zennir Star-Host's own territory, 2 exhausted populations continued, cautiously, to test whether a ceasefire born from an accident neither side had chosen might actually hold longer than anything either side had managed to negotiate on purpose.